Okay, here are the 7 video making myths perpetrated by some YouTube camera experts. Number 1, that the ISO knob controls the camera's image capture. It does not. ISO is a measurement. 100 ISO means that the camera is at its maximum ability to capture image saturation, whatever. But it is used for signal amplification and post-image capture processing. Again, it's a measurement, and the measurement is used for later amplification. Number 2, standard shooting profiles are different from log profiles like C-log, S-log, V-log, etc. No, they're not. All 8-bit video is shot using log gamma functions. Now, RAW isn't. They only differ in which values are saved where. This is a very long topic, but I just want to clear that up, that they're all the same. So the only question is which one is the best one for what you're trying to do. But don't automatically assume that these new C-log, S-logs are better than the standard profile, which is just the log that the camera manufacturers already determined will maximize the video quality of your camera. Number 3, LUTs are applied after we have a watchable video. False. Like needing an 8-bit shooting log, nothing is watchable without a LUT. When you're shown a flat footage, you're shown a masturbation LUT. That's what I call it, because you're masturbating. It's not, you're using a LUT, a lookup table. Remember, it's a color lookup table to values that is not properly calibrated to that image data. So that's why it looks washed out, washed up, washed out, whatever. You got the idea. Number 4, log footage is flat. Sort of like number 3. Log footage isn't anything until a LUT is applied. When you're shown a flat footage, you're shown a LUT that shows a low saturation image using sensor data, which has no intrinsic color. I want to repeat that. Sensor data has no intrinsic color. Again, I could go on about this for an hour, but if you doubt me, again, go do your research and come back and prove to me that the sensor knows what color it's getting. It has no freaking idea. Okay, number 5. The manufacturer's desire to sell more expensive cinema cameras prevent us from getting high bit depth video on small cameras. False. Take a physics class. Again, don't sleep through the friction part. When you have a lot of electrons going through a wire and the wire isn't big enough, it creates heat. It all depends on the power. So this isn't there's no conspiracy or anything like that. You want RAW, you're going to need a camera that has heat sinks, powerful batteries, etc., etc. Number 6. There's a perfect 8-bit codec for both viewing and editing. No. H.264 and H.265, just to talk about the two popular ones, use forward-looking temporal compression. That means they look many frames ahead and behind to figure out how to compress the image data. It makes your computer strain when you scrub backwards in editing because it's not meant to go backwards, it's meant to go forwards. So that's why generally you'll have to convert to ProRes or a higher bit depth, less temporal compression codec so that your computer can basically easily go from frame to frame forwards and backwards. Number 7. With the right log profile and LUT, 8-bit video can match 14-bit RAW. Yes, but no. It depends. Yes, if you're in a studio setting, you have your light absolutely perfect, and you shoot your 8-bit video, you're going to get as good as you can get with RAW. RAW only comes into play if you need to basically use the sensor's data that you didn't already use but now want to use in changing your image. All right. In the final analysis, this is how all video is created. A log curve picks what 14-bit values from the sensor to place in an 8-bit scale. Again, standard profile, log, C-log, S-log, they all do the same thing. There's always a log curve being used in your camera to take the sensor data and put it into an 8-bit data space. After that, a LUT picks what colors our display should show for each of those values. Lookup table. In other words, take the number in your 8-bit scale and look up this color and use it. That's what that means. Finally, a codec further scales the 8-bit values into roughly 3-bit storage for most of us. So when you're watching Netflix, it's really sort of like you're looking at 3-bit video. Again, it could take an hour to explain, but again, if you disagree, please go ahead, fight me on it. Bring your data, bring your arguments. You can apply multiple LUTs and codecs back and forth, all kinds of special tricks, color grades, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, there's only one log curve. It's a transposition from the sensor data to your computer storage or camera storage or whatever. Second, the LUT, which tells you or your equipment what colors to use for those values, and the codec, which compresses it to make it usable. All right, those are the 7 myths I want to clear up at the moment. How did I learn about these 7 myths? Well, it began about 5 or 6 years ago when Panasonic came out with the GH4 and Vlog. So I shot with log some people, and the flesh tones didn't look quite right to me, and I couldn't get them right. And of course, these YouTube experts said do this or do that with the color grading, and anyway, I could never figure it out. And basically, people on these forums were like, "Well, Max, the problem is with you." All right. So I just went back to standard profile and sort of forgotten about it. But at the same time, I was also really getting into Magic Lantern, and here's like a Sony S7D. Now I've had many Canon cameras that run Magic Lantern, and Magic Lantern, let me tell you, is the greatest, best way to learn about how your camera works. What Magic Lantern is a sort of like a software that these geniuses have created that basically, when you put a card into a Canon camera, it looks for like a debug thing to like load software on it. They think to test at the factory. But what these people have done is create this software that goes into it and then basically takes over the camera or takes over certain functions. And one of the things that Magic Lantern does is it will take the video stream coming from the sensor, the raw data, and it'll save it to the card before it gets into the compression scheme where it will create the H.264, the 8-bit video. Now, the cameras aren't meant for this, which means they get very hot. You don't really want to shoot raw for a long time, but if you're just shooting a few minutes, then it's fine. Anyway, the main thing is that once I had a way of being able to shoot raw on a very cheap camera, because in those days raw cameras were like over $5,000. Anyway, so I was able to shoot raw, and that really allowed me to learn about what's going on. Now, from another angle, the reason I'm doing this video is that recently I see many YouTubers on, talking about cameras and filmmaking and whatever, YouTubing, and many of them make these technically inaccurate statements, or they sort of say, "Hey, look how cool what I did, and this is how you do it. I'm an expert, so use log because this is how you get this look I've got." And I'll comment on their things saying, you got this a little bit wrong. But like recently, this one guy got really upset. Like he got emotionally like nuts. Like, you're trying to correct me and this or that. I said, I'm just trying to point out this one little thing. We could talk on the phone for 2 minutes. I'll explain it to you. But he wanted nothing with that. Just a very nasty email. And I've had, not as bad, but I've had other situations where, again, these YouTubers, when I tell them, hey, you don't really quite understand this, they just basically, I don't have time for this, and they just basically replicate each other's work. And I'm not taking anything away from them. I enjoy these channels. I enjoy these YouTubers, and they do some really cool stuff. But they say things that if you follow them, if you for them to get their picture, right, their picture X is fine. But let's just say you want to get Y. If you want to get Y and you use some of the things that they suggest, you will not get there, because what they're suggesting, they don't fully understand how it works. They don't understand that how it works in their situation will not work for your situation. And that's why I want to do these myths, so you understand the very hard physics of how these cameras work. You can write all the marketing stuff you want in the world. You can dream all you want about having the perfect LUT and the perfect color grading thing and the perfect log and all this kind of stuff, but it doesn't care. This operates on physics and electronics and photometry or whatever. That's what runs this camera, and you can't wish certain things away about it. So anyway, I wanted this person recently to maybe do a video on this. I want these guys who already do these videos on these subjects. I mean, this channel is just a very slight hobby thing. It's a small part of my life. They should be doing this, but they're not. So I feel I had to do a video to basically call them out and to warn you, if you're interested, that a lot of stuff you hear from these people is technically unsound. Okay. I will call out one person who did not have a bad reaction, like Curtis Judd. He was talking about some raw video he's shooting. He's saying, oh, well, we did a log this and log that. And I was like, Curtis, there's no log in raw. But he didn't stop talking to me. He took it well. So anyway, okay. So, so that's what I learned, from shooting Magic Lantern, is I learned the process. And you don't see the process if you have a normal consumer 8-bit camera. Even if you have a $4,000 Sony, A7S III or 4 or FX7, whatever the latest, cameras that they have out there that go straight to 8-bit, you will not understand this. So anyway, that's why I wanted to do the video, to let you know that the, light hits the sensor, photons hit the sensor, and what they really hit are electrons. So electrons go from one part of the silicon to the other. They go into what they call buckets. So these electrons that represent photons, because they're bounced by the photons, they go into this bucket, and the camera counts the electrons, and that's the strength of the light. And it doesn't know anything about the color. You know about the color because you know which filter is placed on each pixel, whether it's red, green, or blue. You know that. But it doesn't give an exact color. It's not like it's an exact frequency of 384 nanometers or anything like that. It's just a suggestion of the color. It's just like reddish or greenish or bluish. And then you take these numbers, which are reddish, greenish, or bluish because of these filters, and then you basically apply a LUT, which some, like Rec 709 is a type of LUT. You basically say, okay, here are these numbers, and I know all TVs and phones and videos are all 8-bit displays, so I'm going to take these numbers and put an 8-bit space, and I'm going to say that this number equals red or blue or mauve or maroon or whatever, right? And that's what you do, and then you compress it all. So that's the only steps. So once you get 8-bit video, you cannot go back to RAW. And the problem with LUTs, and I didn't go into it in this other stuff, but I have another video on it, so I'll put it in the description. But the main thing about these new logs is they allow you to get greater dynamic range in contrast, in relative brightness. So if you're outside, it can see the difference in let's say blacks and whites and grays, not only in, let's say, under a tree, but in the sky and all the clouds, which are very bright. So if you use one of these aggressive logs, you can do that. You can get that thing. You can see, again, like the bark on the tree, and you can see the clouds in the sky. But what you lose is color. You don't get that for free because 8-bit can only store so much. So if you take all that contrast, that dynamic range from the sensor, and you put it into your 8-bit space, you lose the color. And that's the problem with these logs. So if you're shooting like a dystopian look or very like washed out look, and that's what you like, and if you look, many of these YouTubers that shoot log in a studio, look at their image closely. It's not really rich. But look at many of the women YouTubers that don't fall for this crap. I mean, you'll see really rich images. It's like, wow, it's like, like watching, professional TV, right? Because they're not falling for that garbage. They're not trading off really high
basically light strength dynamic range for color. They're maximize the color. The camera already has a built-in log function. However, it will deliver the video in its standard shooting that maximizes the ability of the camera and makes sure that you get all the color you need. So another way of putting it is that when you shoot log profiles, you are throwing out color. And you need to understand that. It's okay if you don't want the color, but you have to know that that's what you're doing. Okay. I guess that's enough. I just want to explain to you how this all came about. It came about again. I shot some log with the GH4 when it first came out. The skin tones looked horrible. I started shooting Magic Lantern and studying RAW. And then I learned the whole pipeline. And I realized that the reason that the skin tones looked bad in the GH4 is it was throwing out color. Color I wanted in the flesh tones. We're very sensitive to the biology of faces and flesh tones. Anything that's off, we see it immediately. That's why you generally don't notice it if you're outside or you're shooting, like, again, a science fiction thing. You don't notice missing color because it's not really that type of image. But if you're shooting somebody, let's say an interview scene, and you want them to look as well as possible, you do not want to shoot these aggressive logs in a studio. Anyway, so that's why they didn't work for me. Doesn't mean I wouldn't use log. Like, I like very gentle logs, like sea log. Oh, I'll shoot that outside. I like that look. So it's not like I wouldn't use logs. Again, they have their place. They just don't have a place to me in the studio. Because in the studio, you can control the light and give the camera what it wants and maximize your quality. Okay, how long have I been speaking now for? Oh, almost 10 minutes. Oh, this video is going to be so long. Anyway, I hope you have fun. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you disagree with anything that I say, please, challenge me. I may not know all the answers. I mean, I definitely don't know all the answers, but I may be wrong on some things. If I'm wrong, please tell me. And have a good night.